Hi everyone, this is Dr. Cynthia from Department of Biotechnology. Today we are going to discuss about the course Biochemistry, in which we are going to see about carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, they are defined as polyhydroxyaldehydes or ketones or compounds that hydrolyze to produce polyhydroxyaldehydes or ketones. These carbohydrates, they are made up of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen in the ratio 1:2:1. So most of the carbohydrates, they act as a primary fuel source of the human cells, and general formula to identify this carbohydrate is CnH2nO. Carbohydrates, they act as a precursor for all organic compounds, and they are otherwise called as sugars, and they provide energy when we consume. Plants. In plants, carbohydrates, they are produced by photosynthesis process. So how the carbohydrates are produced in plants? By utilizing the energy, water and carbon dioxide what we exhale. The plants, they take it and they produce carbohydrates in the form of photosynthesis. Animals and human beings, they obtain their carbohydrate sourced from the plant, and carbohydrates in animals, they are oxidized to produce high water, carbon dioxide and energy. And coming to some of the sources, these are all the sources which carbohydrates are present. One is cereals, wheat, rice, potatoes, sugarcane, fruits, bread and milk. These are all some important sources in which carbohydrates are present in more abundant quantity. So the other name for carbohydrate is glycan, and this carbohydrates, they are classified depending upon the number of saccharide units. So saccharide units here is the sugar unit. So why we call that carbohydrate as sugar? Because this carbohydrates, they are sweet to taste. So we call that as in sugar, and this depending upon the sugar units, we classify carbohydrates into four major groups. One is monosaccharide, another one is disaccharide, oligosaccharide and polysaccharide. So monosaccharide, as the name implies, mono, which is nothing but one, which contains single sugar units. So monosaccharides are the sugars which contain single sugar units which has multiple OH groups. It is not an alcoholic group, it is an hydroxyl group. And based on the number of carbon atoms, this monosaccharides, they are classified into trioses, tetroses, pentoses and hexoses. Trioses, as the name implies, it contains 3 carbon atoms. Tetroses 4 carbon atom, pentoses 5 carbon atom and hexoses 6 carbon atoms. Coming to the next classification, that is disaccharides. As the name implies, di means 2. So this carbohydrates which contains 2 monosaccharide units, they are linked together by a special type of bond called glycosidic bond. Another classification is oligosaccharide. Also oligosaccharides are carbohydrates which contains few monosaccharide units, that is more than 2 and less than 10. We categorize that group as an oligosaccharides. And last category of carbohydrate classification is polysaccharides. And this polysaccharides, as the name implies, poly means many. Polymers which consists of chains of monosaccharides or disaccharide units, we call that as in polysaccharide, that is more than 10 monosaccharide units. So this is the classification chart. So first, carbohydrates, they are classified majorly into 2 groups, what is called sugar and polysaccharide. That is, depending upon the function, they are classified into 2 types, sugars and polysaccharides. And sugars, they are sweet to taste, and polysaccharides, they are not sweet to taste. And sugars, that gives you energy, and this polysaccharides, it acts as a cell wall component of animal cells. And coming to the sugars, they are classified again into monosaccharides and disaccharides. So monosaccharides, as I told you already, this is a sugar which contains single sugar units. So example for monosaccharide, it includes glucose, fructose and galactose. And coming to disaccharides, they are sugars which contains 2 monosaccharide units. Example includes sucrose, maltose and lactose. And coming to polysaccharide, as I told you already that this polysaccharides, they are structural components. Again, these polysaccharides, they are classified depending upon their function into 2 types. One is called storage polysaccharide and another is called as structural polysaccharide. The best example for storage polysaccharide is glycogen and starch. So glycogen, it is a carbohydrate which is stored as in animals as a storage form, and plant cells, it stores glucose in the form of starch. And coming to the structural polysaccharide, best example is cellulose and chitin. Cellulose is a fabric which is present in many cell walls, and chitin, it is an exoskeleton component of many arthropods. So elaborately we are going to discuss about monosaccharide in today's class. So monosaccharides, the other name for monosaccharide is simple sugar, and it is defined as polyhydroxyaldehydes or polyhydroxyketones which cannot be further hydrolyzed. The general formula of monosaccharide is CnH2ON, and this monosaccharides contains 3 to 10 carbon atoms, 2 or more hydroxyl groups and 1 functional group. That functional group, it may be a aldehyde group or a ketone group. So it is the most abundant monosaccharide in nature is D-glucose molecule. And coming to this classification, they are classified into number of carbon atoms or by the nature of the functional group that is present. So by the nature of the functional group that is present, this carbohydrates, they are classified into aldoses and ketoses. And number of carbon atom, they are classified into trioses, tetroses, pentoses and hexoses. So aldoses are the carbohydrates which contains aldehyde group as a functional group, and ketoses are the carbohydrates which contains ketone group as a functional group. So most of the carbohydrates, they comes under aldehyde group, so they have glucoses and fructoses. Most of the monosaccharides comes under glucoses and fructoses, and this is the structure of glucose and this is the structure of glucose. If you see here, the first carbon atom is the aldehyde group, and in the fructose, the second carbon atom is the ketone group. So, elaborately discussing about the carbohydrate structure. So, this CH2OH, this is the primary alcoholic group, and it is in 6 carbon compound, otherwise called as hexoses. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. The arrangement of hydrogen and primary hydroxyl group, that is OH group, is present in all the carbon atoms, and the first carbon atom is the aldehyde group, and this is the carbon backbone. And before we go deep into the structure of monosaccharide, we want to know about the isomers. What are isomers? Compounds that have same chemical formulas but different structural formulas. We call that as an isomer. Example is glucose, galactose, fructose and mannose. All these have the same chemical formula C6H12O6, but all of them differ in a single carbon atom on its structure. So epimers is the best example to determine the structure of a monosaccharide. So epimers are two isomers that differ in configuration around one specific carbon atom other than the carbon atom or carbonyl carbon atom. So other than the carbonyl carbon atom and functional group, if two monosaccharides, they differ in the structure arrangement around the single carbon atom, we call that as an epimer. Example, glucose and galactose, they are epimers in terms of carbon atom 4, and glucose and mannose, they are epimers in terms of carbon atom 2. And this is the structure to determine this. This is the structure of glucose. All have 6 carbon atom, all have same molecular formula C6H12O6, but there is a single change, that is arrangement of OH and H group around the single specific carbon atom. That is glucose and galactose, we call that as in C4 epimer. Here, if you see glucose, the OH group is present on the right hand side. In galactose, the OH group is present on the left hand side. Same thing. Here, this mannose and glucose, they are called as C2 epimers in terms of arrangement of same OH group in C2OH group. That is, in glucose, the C2 is present in, OH group is present in right hand side, and in mannose it is present in the left hand side. And next nomenclature of this carbohydrates is D and L configuration. So D and L configuration is based on the single asymmetric carbon atom. A best example for D and L configuration, we call that as a glyceraldehyde. So if the OH group is present on the right hand side, we call that as a D, that is dextrorotatory. If the OH group is present on the left hand side, we call that as a L, it is levorotatory. This is the Fisher's projection formula, and this glyceraldehyde, it is a 3-carbon compound which acts as a best example to determine the structure of all the carbohydrates. And this is the nomenclature of glucose with reference to D and L glucose. So we are going to take glyceraldehyde as a reference compound, and we are going to name glucose and D-glucose and L-glucose. If the OH group is present in the farther away from the carbonyl group, that is the first is the carbonyl group, the OH group, it is 5th carbon atom. If it is in the right hand side, we call that as a D-glucose. If the same OH group it is present on the left hand side, we call that as an L-glucose. And next is the hemiacetal and hemiketal formation, and this is the all the carbohydrates that is present in the nature, they are not present as in straight chain form, they are present in the cyclic form. So to know the cyclic structure of carbohydrates, we have to know what is an hemiacetal and what is an hemiketal. So hemiacetal is the structure which is formed by an alcoholic group and an aldehyde group to form an hemiacetal, and hemiketal, it is formed from ketone group and an alcoholic group. And this is the cyclic structure of a glucose, D-glucose. This is also a D-glucose, but here we are going to give you a new name called alpha and beta. So pentoses and hexoses, they can cyclize as ketones or aldehydes reacts with a distal hydroxyl group to form hemiacetal or hemiketal, and to form a pyranose structure. So glucose, it forms only the pyranose structure, and fructose, it forms either pyranose or furanose. So pyranose is a 6-membered ring and furanose is a 5-membered ring. And this is the cyclization, and I told you that new name is given, that is alpha and beta, and this alpha and beta, it is given on the arrangement of H and OH group on the first carbon atom, that is next to the cyclic ring structure. If the H and OH group, it is on the same side of the ring, we call that as an alpha anomer, and if the H and OH is on the opposite side of the ring, we call that as a beta anomer, and this alpha and beta form of sugars, we call that as an anomeric forms of sugars. And this is another one structural conformation of monosaccharides, that is chair or board conformation. So because of the tetrahedral nature of carbon bonds, this pyranose sugar, they assume chair or board conformation. So these are all some examples, this sugar derivatives, that is D-ribitol, D-gluconic acid and D-glucuronic acid. So sugar alcohol, it lacks aldehyde or ketone, we call that as a ribitol, and sugar acids, the aldehyde at C1 or OH at C6 is oxidized to the carboxylic acid, that will give you raise to gluconic acid or glucuronic acid. This is the final form of monosaccharide structure, that is glycosidic bond formation. So if you want to classify a sugar, we classify that as a monosaccharide, disaccharide and polysaccharide. So disaccharide, as I told you already, that there are two sugars which link together to form a glycosidic bond. This is the example for the formation of a glycosidic bond. How a glycosidic bond is formed? So when an anomeric hydroxyl or hydroxyl group of another sugar of the same compound or other compound, they join together by the eliminating of water, will get a bond between two compounds. That bond is called as glycosidic bond. So these are all some clinical aspects of carbohydrates. So glucose, I told you already that it is the most important energy source in mammals. This is in bulk dietary carbohydrate. Of example is starch, and it is digested and finally absorbed as glucose in the body. Dextrose is frequently used in medicine, and fructose is abundantly found in the semen. And several diseases they are associated with carbohydrates are diabetes mellitus and glycogen storage diseases. Best example is galactosemia, and accumulation of sorbitol and dulcital. These are all the sugar derivatives in tissues. They may contain certain pathological conditions like nephropathy and cataract, and some of the non-digestible carbohydrates, that is polysaccharides, they play important role in human nutrition. So they decreases the intestinal absorption of glucose and cholesterol and increases the bulk of feces to avoid constipation, And last category of polysaccharide is mucopolysaccharide. It is a hyaluronic acid which serves as a lubricant and acts as shock absorbent. Other than mucopolysaccharide heparin, it acts as an anticoagulant. If you want to read further about these carbohydrates, you can go these books. Thank you.